Welcome to the Judgment Free Zone. You've downloaded the Alcohol Free Marriage Podcast, episode 20 for August 22nd, 2022.
Now adjust the volume control so that the sound can be heard in all parts of the room.
Recorded live from the cornfields of Central Illinois, you're listening to the Alcohol Free Marriage Podcast with Matt and Amy. Come and learn and share a journey with two former craft beer enthusiasts who went from daily drinkers to teetotalers and basically never lost their love for their life together.
Hey, a freak show!
Well, hello there, children. Welcome back to Alcohol Free Marriage Podcast, that we also call the Freak Show. I'm Matt, along with the always lovely Coach Amy. How are you, my love?
I am awesome.
You're awesome. I had a little
Happy
challenge.
20th.
I had a little challenge reading this week's podcast because it was the 20th episode for 2022 on the 22nd. So a lot of twos in there.
Yeah, you got to slow. You were really excited when you first started, and then you were like,
Nope.
Okay, I got to get those twos done.
Yes.
Get the 20s,
yeah.
twos.
The tongue got stuck there a little bit, but we are back once again. We have an awesome interview this week.
Yes.
We have an awesome interview next week too. But before we get to that, Coach Amy, how was your week?
It's a good week.
Not quite as action-packed as the previous couple.
No, yeah, it's. I mean, it was back to school, but
It's not quite the same when your children are older.
It is not. But fortunately, I was allowed to take the picture, the first day of picture. And many of you, if you follow me, you will not see the first day of school picture because that was part of the agreement.
The agreement. You may take it, you may not use it.
I'm just documenting that we did have a picture.
Right.
If I do post one, though, it's going to be the fun one of her getting into the car
Oh,
where she
yeah.
is incredibly giving me the death stare.
I was going through our photos and I thought that was the first day of school picture, but then I realized you took it.
Yeah, there is a cute one of her.
Yes, okay. So I'm like, okay, at least you got a decent
I did
one.
send that to a few friends. Look, it did happen.
But you sent it to them directly. You didn't post it on the socials.
Not on the socials.
Yes. Yeah. You don't want to tweet that out. You'll get in a lot of trouble for that.
Maybe in a few years.
But
Maybe
yeah.
on the last day of school when I don't care. I'll just put all the pictures from the first days.
And tomorrow or today, as you people listening to this, it's Luke's last day of school ever.
Yes.
First day of his senior year of college.
That we know of.
Oh, yeah.
Unless he...
That I'm funding.
Yes. That's true. That we are funding.
That's coming out of our...
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
We will be those empty nesters in about a year.
I know.
Crazy.
It is. It's... I'll tell you, everyone, if you've got young kids...
It goes like that.
It goes like that. And just remember, don't get too hung up on all of it. Like when things are going bad, just take a step back.
Like that song says, you're going to miss this.
It's going to be over and then you're going to be, and I know, believe me, I know that the teenage years are quite challenging.
That's an understatement of the week.
Yes, but you've got the attitude
But you don't
coming
need
at
alcohol to get through it, kids.
Well, you don't. That is one of those things. In fact, when I was drinking, those episodes, because let's face it, when you have a daughter, it really starts in junior high.
Yes.
And from the point of being in junior high, when I was still drinking and she was in junior high, those fights and disagreements, although we still have them, have improved.
Well, two
immensely.
things. She's grown up and you quit drinking, so you kind of meet in the middle now.
Well, but it has. I know she's grown up, but we still have had battles.
True.
And you have. Thank you for encouraging me, because you will say, "Oh, nice one."
Yeah,
Good
you
job.
actually didn't lose your. You
Good
actually
job.
didn't lose your proverbial.
Good job.
Yeah.
And I do listen to you when you'll be like, "Let it go, let it go."
And now you're trying something. What's this new sleep thing you're doing? 3, 2, 1.
3, 2, 1. I'm trying to do that. It's 3 hours before you go to bed. You do not eat anything.
Right.
2 hours, no work, and then 1 hour, no screens.
You're not doing too great a job, to be honest, though.
No.
The other night, it was like 10 o'clock, which would be 3.5 hours past any of those times.
And I was still working.
You still had your screen on. I'm like, I'm following the rules. I don't know what you're doing.
I know. And I paid for it because the 2 previous nights I had followed it. It went great. Last night, I followed it. I slept.
See?
I mean, I did wake up, and so, but it wasn't the
It's not a golden
same.
bullet, but
it's
yeah.
not this, you wake up and you're awake all night. It was, I woke
Well,
up.
they've been saying for a long time, turn your screens off before, you know. It never really bothered me. But
in my defense, before I said this, you had the TV on in
because
the bed.
that never bothers me.
But it
I don't have the
bothers
sleep
me.
problem. Yeah.
It bothers me.
So I'm helping you.
You put something on, and I'm sitting there going, "Woohoo! It's
Yeah.
time to watch! Yay!"
I put it on as sound to go to sleep too. You put it on as like watch it.
But and I usually will still put in headphones, and I used to like try to listen to music, but that didn't work because then. If the music has words, I'm gonna be like singing along with it in my head.
Dancing
It's
Queen.
like or whatever. Even if it's relaxing, sometimes even meditation music bothers me. But what I do then is I put on, and this is gonna sound kind of funny, I put on like medical experts because this is the way I work. I figure I like the live talking. I put it kind of low, and then because your brain is always listening, I'm like, maybe if I'm listening to these really smart people talk about medical things,
I'll be a doctor
then
in my sleep.
not I won't be a doctor, but at least I'll get this knowledge.
Good luck with that.
But no, it does work because they're very calm, and like I've even listened to.
Whether you're learning anything,
Yes, but I've also listened. Like when I wake up, I'll be like, oh, well, we're in class. We are actually there's.
I saw a study about this that listening to things like that in your sleep, if you recently learned it, can help reinforce it, but you can't actually learn new things. That's what I learned.
I don't care.
But if it helps you sleep, that's a whole different topic.
It helps me sleep.
You just like that they talk like
I
this.
really,
and
it's
talk
like,
about
hello
medical things.
there. Hello there for.
You're like, I don't know what you're saying anyway, so I can go to sleep.
blah.
So you can't get into it deep because
Unless it's something, about something that's current.
Coronavirus.
Then, but you know what? Even then, now I've gotten to the point it doesn't even matter.
No.
I'm like, oh, we're talking about coronavirus.
Oh, that's on repeat.
I can go to sleep.
All right, Coach
And that is
Amy,
weird.
when you're not sleeping, what is your drink of the week this week?
My drink of the week is Athletic Brewing Company, All Out. It is their extra dark.
You like a dark beer, and that's a solid
do.
one.
And
Well,
this
anything
is-
athletic.
This is very good.
And we recently learned that their Oktoberfest is supposedly out.
I know.
I will probably use that if I can find that on some of these weeks. But
We may have. Does Benny's have that? Do they carry Athletic?
yeah.
Okay.
But I was just on their website because of that, and I swear I didn't see the Oktoberfest. So, but Untitled Art's the same way. You can find stuff in the stores on the website.
Yeah, I
and vice versa.
I wonder if our local grocery store.
I do not know. I, on the other hand, in a strange twist, I'm drinking water, and Amy loves to make fun of me for this, and it really is overpriced, fancy water. It's not even fancy. Liquid Death water.
We need to get you some Holy Spirit water.
The thing I like about Liquid Death, and actually I saw it, I did a video for a tequila company at a music festival, and I don't know why they did it specifically, but for me, I like it because you can drink it, and it doesn't, anybody who's seen the can or watching the YouTubes, you can see the can. It looks kind of like you're drinking a beer can. It looks like a tall boy.
Oh my gosh, no one would, if you were just like glancing by, or if someone doesn't know about this, they would be like, oh yeah, what do you?
It doesn't jump out as a bottle of water, like a plastic bottle of water.
Liquid Death. No, it's just water. Ha ha.
And now they have flavors. So
They do.
The white
Well,
can
of
is
course
flat,
they do.
or still, excuse me. The black can is sparkling, and now they have 2 flavors. I found.
I'd have to try the sparkling.
You might like the sparkling.
I don't know
The
though.
flavor
There's something
sparkling's
about
pretty good.
drinking Liquid Death.
Hey, what's that?
that
There's a
kind
Death
of-
coffee too.
That kind of goes away from me. I'm like, if I'm drinking Liquid Death, maybe I need to get some Holy Spirit coffee or something.
What if you
I don't
make
know.
Holy Spirit coffee with Liquid Death water? What happens then? Does your coffee pot explode?
No, I feel like there's going to be the good angel and the bad angel on my shoulders, sitting there, fighting.
Oh Lord! All right. Well. Okay. Well, speaking of good angels and bad angels, please introduce us, Amy, to our interview this week, which I loved because it's a little bit marriage counseling too. It's it's fun. I really enjoy this interview with Teri. Tell us about Teri.
All right. Teri Patterson is a foodie and entrepreneur, an Instapot lover, and sober grandma. Teri is a functional nutritionist and a This Naked Mind senior coach. She is passionate about lifelong learning, wellness, and family game night.
Yeah.
Teri is the owner and founder of The Sober Nutritionist. Her superpower is inspiring others to create a life of purpose, joy, and wonder on the other side of drinking. Alcohol-free and loving her new life since October 18th of 2015, Teri uses her background in nutrition and life coaching and her passion for habits and meditation to help you break free from the limitations of alcohol and create true health. Let's go to our interview now. Well, welcome everyone to the Alcohol-Free Marriage Podcast, and we are interviewing Teri Patterson, the sober nutritionist and the host of the Sober Edge podcast, which we were on a while back. And Teri is also a senior This Mind coach. And I'm really excited to have you on here today to tell us your story. And then also we're going to talk about the 4 tendencies.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a delight to interview the two of you on my podcast. And I'm excited to get to know your listeners and share a little bit about my story. And I absolutely love talking about the 4 tendencies. So that sounds awesome.
Awesome. Well, if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself and your family, what you also do for fun.
Yeah, great question. Well, let's see, I live in Northern California and I have 3 grown children and I now have 3 grandchildren. So my grandchildren are somewhat unique because I have my first grandson is 10 years old and he has special needs. So he has a disability or he is uniquely abled in the sense that he doesn't walk. And he has some other limitations, but he also is pretty hilarious and a lot of fun. And we really enjoy him. Right now, he's in a phase where he kind of thinks he's a dog. So we have a lot of barking going on. We have a lot of pooping and peeing behavior, which is, quite fun. And then my other grandchildren are twins, fraternal twins. So it's kind of unique. I don't have a single, normative, grandchild. So it's very interesting to watch twins develop together and to have a special needs guy that develops differently. So it's sort of outside of the normal range of grandparenting, but it's all delightful. And all of them live close to me as well as my son. So that's really nice. We live in the same small town in Northern California. And I have, been a practicing nutritionist for 6 years now. And that means that some of the things I do for fun are like make kombucha and, discover new recipes and meal plans and hang out with other nerds like me who are really into food. I love, my mother is the original foodie in our family. And so going out for dining experiences has always been something that I love. So my husband does most of the cooking now as I work full time, but I should say I work full time. I work in this coaching business, which takes up lots of different hours. And so I'm not always available at dinner. So he stepped into that role, which is really fun. And my son is quite a great cook as well. And my son-in-law is a wonderful cook. So food is a big part of our get together and having fun. I also love family game night, but apparently I love it more than everybody else. And so I always feel like I'm pulling teeth to get people to commit to playing the games. So that's a little bit about me. And I, work as a sober life coach, but also in the nutrition field. So it's really great to kind of connect those dots for people.
Yeah.
I think we do a support group for all the husbands who have eat meals by themselves now because all the wives are doing coaching things. So I've talked to a few of them. I think I'm going to start a separate Husbands of Coaches podcast, maybe.
I love it.
Yes, I cook the dinners too. So yeah,
you're a much better cook. You really are. So let's not
better. Yes.
Yeah, you're a great cook. So, well, Teri, can you tell us about your story from drinking to alcohol freedom?
Yeah. So I have been, my sober anniversary date or my alcohol-free date is coming up. October will be 7 years. So 7 years ago, there really wasn't as much available outside of the traditional 12-step as there is now. And so I think that's something to really celebrate, that we're seeing more and more opportunities, more unique ways to find your tribe, if you will. And for me, I just didn't know those sorts of things existed, and I didn't really explore that. And so when I finally got to the place where I was done with trying to moderate, I just kind of stopped. I just told myself I'm going to stop drinking. And I did. And that was something that people sometimes say, and sometimes my husband will say, well, you make it look so easy. And it's like, yeah, but I was stuck in this moderation trap for years, probably about 8 years. I can recall, and even as long as 15 years before my alcohol-free date, when we lived in a bigger town before we moved to where we live now in a small town, I remember thinking that the whole drinking culture we were involved in was too much. It was taking up a lot of our time, our family time. It was interfering with the family dynamic, with our kind of, sharing with our kids what we wanted to share. And even back then in 2000, I felt this sort of tug that something wasn't quite right. And then we moved to a new town. And as you do when you move, you're kind of trying on new friends, right? So we were spending a lot of time like hosting dinner parties, and we started a wine club, and we had lots of fun with people on the lake where we live. And it was very boozy for a long time. And both my husband and I, when we moved there, didn't work for a while. And so it was kind of like you were on vacation all the time. And so as much as I wanted our drinking to change when we moved, it actually escalated. I often tell people that wherever you go, you're going to take your drinking with you. So, because it's an inside job, we know this, right? So I had, several years where I questioned and thought, well, I would just create more rules. I can remember reading an article in an Oprah magazine somewhere in the middle of all that and thinking, I should just be able to moderate like this gal's talking about. And I was always breaking the rules. It never worked. And I finally just got tired of all of the back and forth in my head. And I thought, well, I am miserable drinking. And I think I'm going to be miserable not drinking, but I don't really know. And so I just decided that I was going to be done forever. And I'm, kind of unique, I think. We'll talk about the 4 tendencies. I think it's part of my personality, but I just went out and told people, I thought, I'm just going to tell everybody one time, and then that'll be so much easier. So I just went out and said, hey, I'm not drinking anymore. Hey, I'm not drinking anymore. And that was just how I kind of set up some, accountability for myself and framework for myself, because I was doing it by myself.
Wow. And how was that received, going out and telling everybody?
Yeah, well, I tell this story. I think she knows by now that I tell this story, but my mom was super interesting, because my mom said, well, I don't understand why you stopped drinking. Like, you didn't have a problem. And I said, well, it was a problem for me. And she still would question, first year or so, maybe even a couple of years, she would still sort of question, like, I still don't get it. And so finally, what I told her was, I said, so Mom, if I was smoking cigarettes and I decided I was going to stop, what would you say to me? And she said, oh my gosh, I'd be so excited for you to have this healthy choice and to be making this good decision. And I said, so do that for me with drinking. Like, that's how I need you to show up, because that's how big it is. But she just didn't see those traditional, rock bottom moments, or even recognizing maybe that I was drinking every day or how much I was drinking. And so she just didn't see that there was a reason to stop.
Wow. I love that. I mean, I'm going to use that now, because that makes so much sense, because I had a similar scenario with my mom. Because then she kind of went into well, do you have a problem? And, like this, I'm like, well, Mom, no more than anybody else that I hang out with. I mean, it was one of those. I'm like, no, I'm not doing anything crazy, but it was just it was just really hard for her, because I think with all the dynamics of, we have the person who is on the side of the road, who we consider an alcoholic, who's had the rock bottoms, who doesn't hold a job or whatever. And then we have everybody else. I think that is what she was thinking.
As long as you keep the wheels on the bus, you're fine. And I appreciate your comment about the moderation train, because I tried that too for a while, and it's just so much work. And I didn't believe it at the time. I'm like, oh, moderation is like the golden ticket. I can still drink, but I'm drinking responsibly. But in hindsight, the amount of mental work, did you feel the same way? The amount of mental capacity it took up was a lot.
Oh yeah. I remember telling my husband, I had that moment where I woke up the next day and I thought, this is it. And so I went out to the living room and I said, I'm going to stop drinking forever. And I might have to go to meetings. And by meetings, I meant AA, right? So that was kind of my scared straight moment. And now I have nothing but love and affinity for AA. I think it's a wonderful place if people find that helpful. But at the time, I had so many misconceptions about it that it seemed very scary. And living in a small town, I was bound to run into someone, and it just seemed like such a shameful road. So I thought, I'm just going to not have to do that. And so my husband said, wow, okay, what's going on? And I said, well, here's my head. And I told him, I spend all of my time thinking about drinking, thinking about not drinking, thinking about how much I drank, thinking when I'm going to drink again, thinking about what alcohol's in the house. When do I have to buy alcohol? I said, it's exhausting. And he said, really? You think about all that? And I said, yes, it's very noisy and crowded, and I want to turn that off.
Yeah. Your whole day becomes your whole day in life, for that matter, come about, when is the next time I get to drink? And yeah, it does become very exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
So what led you then to find Annie Grace? Because if I'm correct, you did not know about Annie's work until later.
Correct. Yeah. So I think Annie and I once did the math, and I think that she was publishing her book right around the time I stopped drinking. So if I had thought about searching, I might have even been able to get an early copy. But what happened for me was, as I let go of drinking, I had so much time and energy. I thought, well, I got to do something. And, the universe, God, however you want to, identify that force that's out there, stepped in, and I opened up the paper, like New Year's. They were having like a health and wellness edition. I opened up our little town's paper, and on the front page was a woman who had been to a nutritional school, and she was opening a practice in our town. And I read about her and her partner, and I read about this school, and I thought, that's what I want to do. That would make so much sense. I've got all this time and energy. I don't have a project. I'm crawling out of my skin. I need something. And I'd always been what I call a wellness enthusiast. So I'd always done all the things, and I'd coached people through nutrition without having anything formal. And so I thought, I'm going to talk to her. So I called her up and I said, can I come and talk to you about this school? And she said, absolutely. So I made an appointment, we had coffee, and she became my mentor. And so I went to the Nutritional Therapy Association, and I started like the next month. And so I went that entire first year of being alcohol free. I was studying nutrition. I was learning about the physical effects of all the food I was putting in my body, a little bit about alcohol, not as much as I thought I would, but also just learning to honor what the changes that I had made by giving up alcohol. And so that was super fun and positive. And when I graduated from nutrition school, I started working with clients. I started a curriculum around sugar detox, and I was meeting people. And part of the sugar detox was, well, you can't drink alcohol during the period of time we're doing the program. And that was the hardest lift for people. Like, they were like, I'm okay with giving up sugar, but I can't give up the wine. And so I would gently kind of say, let's talk about that. But the reality was, I didn't have any tools. I just had my story. And so I, kind of would share with people, but I didn't get really far. And so it was a conversation I wanted to have, but I didn't know how. And then one day I was listening, I'll never forget it, because I was in my kitchen. I think I was mopping the floor. And on the kitchen table, I had my laptop open, and I was listening to a summit. And if anybody's in the online business world, summits are where, a group of people come and present, usually very content rich information in exchange for you signing up for their list. And so I was on this summit on addiction, and the man, I don't remember the man, but he was interviewing a woman named Annie Grace, and she started talking about alcohol, and my ears perked up. Pretty soon I put down the mop, sat down at the table and thought, that's what I would have needed. That would have been perfect. And then I thought, well, heck, that's what my clients need. So I went through, and this would have been in fall of 2018. So I was 2 years alcohol free, and I decided to go through, or 3 years, sorry, alcohol free. I decided to go through the 30-day alcohol experiment. And at that time, it was only a free version online. And I thought, well, I don't need to become alcohol free, but I want to figure this out. Like, what is she teaching people? What is going on here? So I did that for the 30 days, and I started sharing it with my clients. And then, because I was now on her email list, I got advance notice of, hey, we're thinking about training coaches. And so that's how that all happened. And I was in the first cohort of coaches that certified in 2019.
That's so awesome. And you were like, I was telling Matt, you were like one of the superstars when I went through, because we watched all of you guys' training videos. That was part of our training. And so when I was just so excited to get into the mastermind, because I'm like, oh, I'm going to get to talk to Teri. I mean, it was just one of those things. So it's just such a great story, because Annie and her book, when I read her book, I just remember it was, you were asleep and I'm up just devouring that book and going, oh my gosh, this is me. What is, and just, so it was very exciting. So thank you for sharing that. That's just great.
Yeah. And for me, it feels like it's really come full circle, because here I was, this wellness enthusiast who was drinking. And then I stopped drinking and I got into nutrition, and then I blended that. And so it's really been such an honor to be able to see that come together. And then another full circle moment for me is this year I had the privilege of working alongside the brand new coaches that are in training. And so that was another full circle moment. It was like, wow, this is, and it's been such a relatively short amount of time. I mean, really, it's just coming up on 3 years. 3 years this month that I certified, and 3 years in November since I started working with This Naked Mind as a contract coach. And so all of that is just, it's just, incredible how when we let go of alcohol, things open up.
It is. I mean, it's just a different world.
And I love your comment about, I have this free time, I need to fill it up with something. And the funny thing is, I think if you quit long enough, you fill up that time, and then you find yourself saying, well, I don't have time to drink. I got too much to do. Like I'm doing too much to have time to sit down and just drink all night. I'm like, I got things to do. It's like all of a sudden you flip the mode of, well, that's kind of boring. I'm just going to sit there and drink all night. I'm like, I'm going to do stuff, like go out and whatever, you end up filling that time, and you don't have the desire to drink because you're not just sitting around all night drinking.
Yes, absolutely. And what I see is that the more people focus on building a life after alcohol, the more exciting it becomes to let go of alcohol. So I think that I see, the more I coach, the more I recognize that people are really building that new life, and that is pulling them away, and it's pulling them toward the new life, rather than, it's less about letting go of alcohol and more about building your alcohol-free life.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I want to just say, I know that you've been teaching, and I went through one of we have what's called a Sherpa Share, and it's when our senior coaches come on and teach. And you came on and you taught us about the 4 tendencies. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to invite you on as well. After that, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is such great information. I came home and I took the test. I think I took it before the class. And then I had you take the test, and it's just been so much fun I love personality tests. It makes so much sense. And I'm laughing when I started to read what I am. So I thought if we could jump in, and if you want to kind of tell us about the 4 tendencies and how you work that into your coaching practice, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah. So I love the work of Gretchen Rubin, and she is the author of the 4 Tendencies and the creator of the 4 Tendencies framework. And I was first introduced to her work. I don't exactly remember how, but the first book that I read of hers, she wrote a book on habits called Better Than Before. And it was right around the time I stopped drinking. And so that was something that I can't remember, it was right before or right after, but just that book on habits. And then from there, I was kind of connected with her. And so when she wrote that book on habits, she was kind of doing research and discovered that there was this framework that she hadn't really paid attention to. And so the 4 Tendencies was born from her research. And it's really a very narrow framework about how people meet inner and outer expectations. And so if we think about it in terms of like, how do we make a habit change? It's going to depend if you're someone who needs a lot of accountability, or if you're someone who, doesn't want to do it the way everybody else does it. And so what I found was that as I explored more about the 4 tendencies and the frameworks, that it made sense to bring it into my coaching. And so I have all my one-on-one clients take the 4 tendencies quiz, because it's very helpful to say, gosh, if you are wired a certain way, then that's going to make a difference in how the coaching relationship goes. Because some people want to do homework, some people don't. And you could ask them, do they want to do homework? But if you know what their tendency is, there's also a lot more information. And I always think it's interesting when we take these personality tests, whether it's the Enneagram or the Myers-Briggs or the 4 tendencies, people say, oh, I don't like my, answer. I want to be something else. But the reality is we're wired the way we're wired. And the beauty of these assessments is not to pigeonhole people, but it's just to play to your strengths. Like, let's celebrate what works best for you, and let's do more of that, instead of thinking you have to do what your next door neighbor's, Uncle Joe did, because that may or may not work for you depending upon how you're wired.
Yeah, that's great. And I want to tell everybody what we are. And then you can kind of lead us through this, because I just thought that this was so interesting. I am.
What are the 4 types again?
The 4 types are the upholder, the obliger, the questioner, and the rebel.
Yes.
I got that. All right. I got it correct, because I don't have my cheats on that.
And you are?
And I am the questioner, and you are
the obliger.
Yes. So
yes.
I read it. I'm like, yep, that sounds right.
And Teri, you're an upholder.
Yes, that's correct. And so it's interesting because in the alcohol-free coaching that Amy and I do, we find a lot of rebels. And rebels is one of out of the number of people that are, in these different 4 categories, the less rebels than anybody else. But we find a lot of them in this naked mind space, because I think it's because we're doing something different. It feels very different than your traditional way to let go of alcohol. I mean, one of the things that Amy and I coach people through as they start this journey is quit trying to quit, like stop trying to stop drinking. And that, to a rebel, to someone who wants to go against the grain, identity is really important. That's something they can really relate to. Yeah, I'm going to do that thing where I don't have to stop drinking, and that's how I'm going to stop drinking. And it seems so counterintuitive, but for a rebel, it's very exciting.
Yeah, because I know where I'm at, the circles overlap. And so when I took it, I thought, well, I think I might be a rebel, but I definitely am a questioner. But I think I have those rebellious tendencies that do come out. Because no, you're not going to tell me what to do.
Yeah, well, and so I'll explain a little bit more about what the different types are, but I'll just say too about the rebels that Annie Grace herself is a rebel, which is why she wrote a book that says, control alcohol. And many people, when she first wrote that book, some of the recovery circles, they didn't like that on the cover. They said, no, you can't control alcohol. Remember, we're powerless. And she was like, no, I'm going to teach a different way. And I've learned differently. And so that is so much like a rebel. So the 4 tendencies really, again, help us with inner and outer expectations. So the largest number of people fall into Matt's category of the obliger. And those are people who readily meet outer expectations, but have difficulty with inner expectations. So one of my daughters is I think actually all 3 of my children are obligers, which is interesting. And so my oldest daughter, I remember her telling me, oh yeah, like I'll take everybody at the office and I'll shuttle them back and forth to get their car, oh, I'm dropping my car off for service. Oh, that's a good idea. I'll make an appointment. She says, meanwhile, the appointment that I had a week ago, I never got to take my car in because I was so busy shuttling all the other people around. And so, an obliger is someone who, really is drawn toward a team. They're great accountability buddies. They love to be accountable to others. And so like group coaching works really well for them. And they are anybody outside of the obliger tendency. We need obligers in our world, right? Even though sometimes people say, well, I don't want to be the people pleaser that does all the things. But really, you are the ones that are sort of the glue that get things done, that step up. I was one of those people from early as a mom. I remember all the other moms would be like, and I'd read all the women's magazine articles and they'd say, well, you are, stop, just say no, you're doing too much, set boundaries, don't volunteer for everything. And I would think, I don't volunteer for anything. I'll let all those other people. And those would have been the obligers who were thinking that, if they need me, and I better say yes, I better bake the extra dozen cookies, I better sign up for another year of PTA, all the things that as an upholder, not as much of a sense of obligation. So accountability is really key for the obligers. And one of the things, and you might probably read this in the book or in the articles about it, but Matt, one of the things to be aware of is that obliger rebellion. So sometimes obligers get overwhelmed with the amount they're doing for everyone else. And they give. And then when they reach that threshold, they blow up.
Amy's familiar with that.
Yes.
Amy's familiar with that.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, what happened?
Well,
What happened to my sunny husband who is like always doing? I've had it. Out of nowhere.
Yes. And, it is a way for the obliger to sort of reset. And if we wait a little while, that blows over. They feel like, okay, got that off my chest. And then they start back in the same pattern. And so what's really helpful for the obliger themselves is, really noticing that obliger rebellion, what's building up, where is their resentment, where can I say no more? And things that can be helpful to an obliger is some accountability to their future self. To say, gosh, the Matt of today wants to say, oh, yes, I won't exercise because I'm going to do all these tasks for someone else. But if you're accountable to your future self, exercising could be something that you use as a strength, as a way to, check in with yourself and do more of the things that are important to you. And then, Brene Brown has a beautiful statement where she says, choose discomfort over resentment. So I think that's a big one for obligers, even when it's uncomfortable to say no. If it's going to be something that creates resentment, it's really powerful to just be uncomfortable for the moment.
Yeah. And it's hard to be an obliger when you own your own business too, because if I give somebody a price and, well, that's too high. Oh, well, I want to do it. And then you start lower and it's dangerous. It's a slippery and dangerous slope. So yes, totally understand.
Yeah. So that is the most people fall into that category. And the second most people fall into Amy's category, which is the questioner. And so the questioner, they have Gretchen Rubin asked groups of people to come up with a motto. And the motto for the obligers is, you can count on me and I'm counting on you to count on me. So that accountability piece. And the questioner is, I'll comply if you tell me why. So the questioner has difficulty with outer expectations, but readily meets inner expectations. So what that means for the questioner is that once they have enough information and it becomes an inner knowing, an inner expectation, you figured it out, then you're all in. So questioners are awesome because they're the ones who say, why are we doing it that way? When everybody else can be, just that's the way we've always done it. And so we need questioners in our midst, and questioners are great to have in the types of coaching that Amy and I do with programs, because there's lots of science behind the alcohol experiment and This Naked Mind and the PATH programs. And that probably was something that really resonated with you, Amy.
Oh, it was, when I read over your little points here, it just made sense. It was like, oh, yeah, that is me. I mean, but I will say I laughed at it says, can be very annoying to others.
Amen.
I'm like, oh, ow, that one kind of hurt. But then I was like, yeah, I don't care.
Well, and the annoying part comes with all of the questions,
Yes.
because many of us are like, yeah, that sounds great. And we just move forward. But the questioner is like, I think I need a little bit more information. Or did we look at it from this angle? And everybody else is like, we're done, move on.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Like when certain points, like moving on from things, I hang on for a lot of stuff. And I think also because for several years, I was the president of our band organization. And why do we do it that way? Why do we do it that way? We don't have to do it that way. They did it that way 10 years ago. We don't have to. And I'm no longer
invited to band meetings.
Yeah, but I always had short band meetings because I was also like, okay, here we go. Boom, boom, boom. Let's get this and be on task. But it is amazing that I had one of our fellow coaches, she said, oh, I knew you were a questioner. She's like, I knew it from the moment I met you. I'm like, is that bad? Is that good? But yeah, just wanting to dive in. And then with when I quit drinking, it makes so much sense because I just dove in and kept asking more questions. And now my question is to almost everybody, and I have to pull myself back, is why are you doing this? What if you know all of this, why would you do this to yourself? And so that can be a hindrance. I think sometimes it's like, all right, you have to pull yourself back.
And Teri, I was looking at the picture, and like everybody can kind of overlap with your neighboring circle, if you will. Yes. Which is good because you said you're an upholder, right? And one of my favorite features or characteristics of an upholder is love to-do lists, and I love to-do lists. So that definitely is an overlap point for me for sure. But I do so much to obliging. I need a to-do list because I have so much to do.
Yes, that's right. You need a to-done list.
There, yes.
True.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that, questioners really, they help all of us go deeper, and they help us. And I think as a coach, being a questioner, you give your clients permission to ask questions, to, and really help them from your perspective and your own tendencies. Say, gosh, what have you asked a different question? What have you questioned that belief, that thought? I think that's very powerful. And so I see that as a total strength for coaches. One of the things to think about as a questioner is that they don't like to be asked questions. Have you noticed that about Amy?
Just a little.
What's so funny about it is we think about like the questioner should appreciate other people's questions, but here's what happens. The dynamic is that Amy's done all the research. Like, I've figured it all out. You don't need to question me. Of course I researched that and that and that and that and that.
Of course I'm right.
Of course I'm right.
Yes, I did all the research. So I think it's fascinating. And in a marriage situation with a questioner and obliger, always with an obliger, one of the partner's best things they can do for the obliger is help them avoid obliger rebellion. Help them assess whether or not saying yes to that means, what does it mean that you're saying no to? When you say yes to this, Matt, what are you saying no to? And that can be a place that can help your partner stay out of obliger rebellion, which helps us too, right? And so, yeah, I love that. And so just thinking about, how we work as a questioner and an obliger together. And Matt, for you, knowing that there are going to be lots of questions, and you, rather than just going along or saying yes, can lean on Amy and say, well, let me run that by my wife. And she's going to say, like, of course, you're not going to do that. You've got this you've committed to, and this you've committed to. And did you ask yourself?
Another camera that you're watching?
I feel like this is hilarious because you have got us completely.
Well, and the whole thing about the questioner telling the obliger to maybe not do something because we get overscheduled. She does that to me. It's like, you don't really need to do that today. That's okay if you don't do that today. And in my own head, and a lot of times I don't, and I'm glad I don't. But in my head, I'm thinking, well, then I'm lazy. I'm not doing something. I'm lazy. I'm not getting this done. I'm not fulfilling that task, But at the same time, I'm like, I do kind of like not doing that.
Yeah. So it's a great
that rebellion
balance.
Piece. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a great balance because you allow him to question and to look at a different perspective. And he also allows you maybe to say yes to things even before you've done all the research. One of the defaults or faults, if you will, with a questioner is we can get analysis by paralysis. So an obliger can step in and say, enough research. I already said yes. And then you're like, but it can be helpful. It can be helpful to just let go and move on. And it is that beautiful dance that, just one more layer of how we relate as, a partner can relate. So I think I think it can be fun to explore that.
What is your husband? You said you're an upholder. What's your husband?
Oh my gosh. So my husband is a rebel. And the reason I know he's a rebel is because he refused to take the quiz.
Default.
And he is just a rebel through and through. And so with an upholder easily meets inner and outer expectations. And so a lot of people say, well, I wish I was an upholder because, gosh, you can say yes to people when you want to. You can say yes to yourself. I'm very guarded with my schedule. Again, I don't say yes easily. I'm not the person who volunteers for all the things. I hold back. I make sure it works for me because I'm honoring those inner expectations. But what it means is that I can be very rigid. My schedule is very important. I'm, not as spontaneous as maybe I would like to be because it's on my calendar. So very driven by my calendar and those obligations that I have to other people. It feels like I keep my word. It's very important. And so I want to make sure that as an upholder, I'm upholding all the things, which makes it difficult when my rebellious husband, who doesn't keep inner or outer expectations, the rebel is like, I can't remember what their motto is, but it's basically like, I'm not doing any of the things, even if I want to. So what's so interesting about a rebel is that they have difficulty doing the things they want to do. As soon as there's an expectation, they're going to do them. So my husband and I, for example, he'll be talking about a movie to go to, pre-COVID, obviously, but, and I'll say, oh, that movie's coming into town. We should go see it on Saturday. There's a show. And he'll be like, well, I don't know what I'm doing Saturday. What makes you think I want to go to the movies Saturday? And I'll say, well, you've been talking about going to the movie, but as soon as there's that external expectation, it's so hard for him to say yes. And so we, apparently rebels and upholders are supposed to have challenges beyond the normal partner challenges, according to Gretchen Rubin. However, we're coming up on our 40th wedding anniversary, so we figured it out.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh my gosh. This is so fascinating.
And this all comes from what book again?
It's called The 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. So she really talks about it in terms of the indispensable personality profiles that reveal how to make your life better and other people's lives better too. And she talks about if you have a child that is a certain tendency, with all my obliger children, sometimes it's hard for me to have them just sort of their communication with each other. It's like, be more forceful. Well, she didn't want to, or she didn't call me. Then you call her. Oh, and it's like, what's going on here? And as an upholder, all of that comes very easy to me. And so I think one of the most interesting things that has really helped me with this personally for this framework is when it comes to the obligers, Matt, and they are, again, the biggest group. One of the things too that I thought was so interesting, and I share this with my clients who are obligers. We see a lot of obligers in our group programs because they like the accountability, right? But what I help them realize is that people are not taking advantage of you. They are a questioner who wouldn't do the thing if she didn't want to, if it didn't make sense for her. Or they're an upholder who says, doesn't fit on my schedule, revisit next time. And then the rebel says, I don't do anything until I just decide at the spur of the moment. And so, the obligers are thinking that everybody is going to step up. And we think you're like us, you wouldn't do it if you didn't want to do it. And so it's fascinating to me how when we start to pay attention to other people's tendencies, we can have more compassion, more empathy, more allowance for the way we show up in our relationship.
I love that. And I'm just thinking in terms of volunteering at the school. I'm seeing all of us at our meetings, here we are, the questioners and the obligers. And, we have our sign up sheets and people are signing up, and you have some same people who don't sign up, but then guess what? They show up. So, they must be probably rebels. I'm not going to sign up for your silly list. I'll be there if I want to be there.
If I decide at the moment, I'll be there if it fits my schedule. Yeah,
exactly. And I have met upholders who now I have actually more respect for, because it's like, no, this, you know what, you are doing this. And I think this is great that you are doing this, because I can't do this because I have other things on my schedule. I might not like that, but now I understand that so much better. Oh my gosh, I wish I would have had this 6-7 years ago when I
if you know what somebody is, right? If you know what somebody's tendency is, you can harness that power for good, right? Like, oh, I know what your tendency is, so I will speak in a way that does that, or I at least understand why you're doing what you're doing, and increases probably tolerance, understanding, and ability to work with people. And I bet it helps a lot in the coaching, just because if I'm quitting drinking, it's good to know my own personality type, but it's also good when you maybe get a little more stressed because you're quitting drinking, to understand the people around you, and especially the people who you're living with, to kind of work on understanding that dynamic as well, because it makes you, I think you question less. It's like, well, I just know how things are going to be. And you don't sit there and like, I'm not going to change her. Right. But I can understand how she is or why she is, and decide that I'm going to do what I'm going to do based on that, or I'm going to ask her to do something because I know she's good at it. So help me stop saying yes, please.
Well, yeah, if you think about it. So let's say the two of you are in this dynamic, and I know Matt from our previous conversation that Matt stopped drinking after Amy. And so let's say Amy in her questioner is like, why are you still drinking? Like, when are you going to stop? Like, didn't you say you were going to stop? Did you know alcohol's bad for you? And I'm sure you weren't trying to coach him, but your natural questioner tendency. And then here's the obliger over there saying, I got to do it for Amy. Like she's after me, like, why is she asking me all these questions? But now, if you think about it, if you have a couple and that's the dynamic, the questioner could say, oh, I need to let them come to their own conclusions, just like I like to come to my own conclusions.
And I would have to say that I think Annie covered that really well in This Naked Mind, because that was something that I really wanted to go after him and say, okay, no, you got to quit. You got to quit. And I just remember her saying, don't do that. And that was so good to read, because it was like, okay, everything at times, it was like, okay, I want to go tell him. Okay, I'm not going to. And so which was good.
Everybody's on journey.
Yeah, everybody's on their own journey. And I have to constantly remind myself of that as well. Just in general with everybody I meet. It's like, do you really want to hear this? I mean, that I actually will say that to people now. If they ask, I'll like, do you really want to know why I quit? Because I just want to ask you that, because if you don't know what you're going to get into, if you really, do you really want to know? And some people have been like, yeah, tell me about it. Other people are like, oh, this might, no, let's table that conversation.
They're afraid of what you're going to say. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Teri, I could go through couples therapy all day probably.
Oh yeah.
And I appreciate all the insight and the help. Tell us where people can find you. We'll put your links in the show notes, but share with people where they can find you for all of your goodness.
Yeah, well, thank you. So I am thesobernutritionist.com is where you can find my website. That's also my Facebook page. I have a podcast called The Sober Edge. And then I'm on Instagram, Teri.thesobernutritionist.
Oh, awesome.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh, we forgot the last question.
Oh, yes.
Do you have a favorite alcohol-free drink?
Oh, that's such a great question. And the answer is yes, but it's just water, filtered water. I think it's the nutritionist in me. However, I do have a slight twist on my filtered water because one of the things I always recommend that people do when they are working on getting their body back into homeostasis, this is now me wearing my nutrition hat, but we become depleted in so many minerals, and those trace minerals that are hard to get in our natural food supply, or we are depleted because of the alcohol use and just not eating a very healthy diet, which happens a lot when we're over drinking. So I have people add a little bit of quality sea salt or Himalayan salt to their water, just a pinch or two, because salt that's not iodized. So Himalayan sea salt has over 90 trace minerals. And so that's going to give you the ability to build back some of those really important nutrients like manganese and chromium and selenium that we don't get in our diet. So that's my tip, is just drink your water, stay hydrated. It helps with your clarity of mind, and then add a little bit of that quality salt and just help your body get back to basics.
Teri, if we don't have Himalayan sea salt by the time I go to bed tonight, I will be surprised.
I love it.
Well, thank you so much for being on our podcast. And we might have to have you come back so that you can tell us more on the nutrition side of your business. So.
Yeah, well, always. I love that. There's lots to talk about when it comes to sugar and alcohol, and just for people, like me, what comes next after you stop drinking? And for many people, focusing on their health, wanting to, like Amy, you said, there's so much vibrancy to our life after not drinking. Let's increase it. Let's live longer, healthier.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Well, thank you, Teri, for a great interview. A little couples therapy to the obliger and the
questioner.
The questioner. I think that's
always questioning.
Always questioning. And I'm always obliging, just like here on the podcast. I oblige you with a podcast.
And we don't want to have you go into that obliger rebellion.
Obliger rebellion.
I'm gonna have to.
I always just called it like throwing a fit or having a rant, but apparently it's a rebellion. That sounds fancy.
Rebellion. Doesn't that make you feel better?
Yeah.
I'm rebelling.
No, I'm not having a fit. I'm rebelling. Sure, whatever.
Yeah.
All right, kids. Well, if you got any feedback, just email that to Amy at jointhirside.com, because that's just easier.
And don't forget, you can get our alcohol-free somewhere. Alcohol-free? No, I screwed that up.
It's alcohol. It's 5 o'clock summer alcohol-free edition. I got it right.
You got it right this
time. I never
time.
get it right.
You can sign up for that on my website at that email.
jointhirside.com.
Amy at joyontheotherside.com.
There you go.
We're having a lot of issues. I
We
guess we
are.
really need to write all this stuff down so I can read it, because
Good thing.
apparently I'm better now at reading
Then remembering.
than remembering.
All right, kids. Well, wishing you peace and love from the cornfields. I am Matt, along with Coach Amy, wishing you a dib-a-dib. We're going to keep that in there, because if you made this far, you deserve that, kids. Wishing you peace and love from the cornfields, and we are
Out.